This is the DRC meeting for DeCloverly Hall. I'm Christina Sorrento. I am the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And your lead on this is Amy Lindsay. The purpose of this meeting is to answer any questions that the applicant may have based on the comments that you received. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. I will turn it over to Amy to first just highlight any of the major items we should talk about, and then turn it over to the applicant to ask any questions. So, Amy?
Good morning. Just pulling the plan up. There we go. Now, so I just wanted to sort of highlight kind of our top 3 issues. So the first issue has to do with the structure of the plan. This plan's a little unusual. I don't think if it was initially approved today that it would be set up the same way, but it was approved as one preliminary plan and one site plan. So I understand that strangeness happened with one of the parcels that went through an additional site plan to add residential development on it, but so it was therefore removed from a previous site plan, but it's one preliminary plan and one site plan for the entire site, which means that every amendment is not an amendment of an individual parcel. It is of the entire plan. So I know that different parcels are under different ownership, but that's the way this plan is set up. And so that, for example, that means that the forest conservation plan applies to the entire plan area, not just to an individual parcel, right? Site plans were not separated that way. That's kind of where we are. So at the end of the process, we will need to have a site plan with all relevant sheets for all parcels. It all needs to be in there with one cover sheet with a listing of sheets that cover all parcels. I understand they're not all being amended, but it just needs to be set up that way. The second issue has to do with the progress, the sector plan, and where we see this area going. We have asked for frontage improvements along the front of the parcel, right, along the frontage of parcel KK. However, the sector plan has a lot of recommendations for in particular, transportation improvements in this area. We would like to work with you to try and develop a plan to figure out how we're going to get there. You know, what it is we can do now to set up for the future. You know, we acknowledge that proportionally that this is the majority of the activity is taking place on one parcel, but how can we start to achieve the sector plan vision and really you know, set this up for success? The third major issue I'd like to highlight actually has to do with the oval and that open space. You know, we see this redesign, but having been out there multiple times, I can tell you that it's very unusual to have mature canopy coverage in this area. We would like to see you maintain those trees while redesigning in a way that actually works for the users here, but in a way that doesn't set you back, you know, 10 or 15 years in canopy coverage. So There are many other comments that we had, but those are kind of the three big ones. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Hey, everybody, this is Pat LeVay from MHG. As Amy mentioned, there's a lot of weeds to get into probably on this one. So I think we're going to end up needing probably at least 2 follow-up meetings, but and I'll get into that in a minute. But just to build on what Amy was saying about the unusualness of this, it is strange. I think there's, if I remember correctly, I think there's 8 properties in the preliminary plan, and then 7 of them made it through to the site plan. And I agree with Amy that, a lot of those old site plans and site plan amendments are very vague. There's not much information at all, details, landscaping, lighting, et cetera. Really what we were doing here was trying to sort of, okay, let's the parcel we're developing, let's do it the right way on that parcel going forward. And that's why you kind of see this overall, big picture view. And then we have something like you see on the screen here, where it's this parcel with the development standards. And we had to use the new code on this parcel because the density is actually increasing on this parcel. Overall, the density is not changing on the preliminary plan, but we're shuffling density to the site. So I think we'll have some work to do together just to get the formatting where everybody's comfortable, but hopefully we can work through that issue, knowing that it's an unusual plan, and do the best we can. So I think the follow-up meetings we'd want to have would be, one, to discuss sort of the bigger picture stuff with regards to the frontage improvements, the dedication, the forest conservation. And then I think secondarily, we'd have a meeting, more into the design weeds that Amy was mentioning about the oval and so forth. I don't know that we really need the whole DRC group for either one of those, but I think, time is of the essence with our, regulatory clock. And perhaps we could take this opportunity here to, schedule maybe a formal follow-up to at least address those big picture items. And then I can work with Amy and her team separately on a design meeting. But I will also ask you guys if that's the right way to handle that bigger picture meeting, or if I should just sort of, request those offline. I mean, again, I think for that bigger picture meeting, because frontage improvements are involved, we probably need DOT on the line. But we don't need all the other stakeholders necessarily.
Okay, Pat, so we have a standing, setup where you can request a meeting for next week on Tuesday, and we could set one up for you. But I'd like us to be able to try and discuss some of these items now while we have the time in DRC, and then whatever is outstanding, we can set up the meeting for you next week.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Matt Folden. I think that the frontage improvements and transportation element of the plan is probably pretty well defined. I don't know that we'll need a whole follow-up unless you saw something that caught your attention, because we limited our comments just to the frontage of parcel KK, recognizing that that's where the disturbance is occurring and that's where the project itself is located.
Well, thank you. I'm kind of surprised to hear that, frankly, just because what I saw in the comments, and maybe there was some confusion before they were issued, but I didn't actually see any frontage improvements requested on parcel KK, only dedication. The requested improvements are actually at the entrances that are on the 2 flanks of the site, east and west, on Omega and Diamondback, and then the entrance here that's in front of parcel OL. So, that was a big thing, was, okay, we're being asked to, reduce the radii on all those entrances and redo the crossings, but a lot of those properties or all those properties really aren't even involved with the amendment. So that was sort of the one big picture question. And if you're telling me that that's been scaled back, then maybe we.
Yeah, and sorry, let me clarify, because I was thinking big picture master plan frontage improvements. The improvements that you're referencing, we did include because those are the pedestrian route out to the bus stops to the new building. And so those were ADA improvements in order to improve the pedestrian circulation.
Yeah, and I think that, we don't have our entire team here. I know Pat Harris is on vacation this week. I think we have representatives from the ownership, but I think there's a concern there about, having to improve those other frontages of properties that they do and don't control. There's tenants, there's things like that. I think that the stuff in front of this site is totally understandable. I didn't actually see any comments, maybe I missed it, but about, what we normally call frontage improvements, like a bike path or something. I just only saw the comments about the curbs and the crossings at the entrances.
Yeah, Pat, Richard is sitting here right next to me, and he was saying, we commented on the dedication on the front of parcel KK, recognizing that it's such a limited frontage that it didn't really make sense.
Okay. Well, that was going to be a question too I was going to have, is just to clarifying, is dedication request just parcel KK? Because, again, all these other properties aren't necessarily under our control.
Yeah.
Out here. So, I think, again, I think we probably as a team need to huddle up a little bit and look at those various improvements or requests at the entrances, but that may be something that we want to have a follow-up discussion about. And then I think the other one is obviously forest conservation. Just sort of the backstory on that for everybody that's not aware of all of this is, this site had previously been approved for 105,000 square feet of office on site plan. It had received exemptions when the office was approved. There was an exemption granted when the change of use happened, the preliminary plan amendment for parcel Z and parcel BB. Going into this application, thankfully, Josh, Kay, and Matt, your teams flagged forest conservation as a potential issue. We worked together to come up with an agreement that parcel KK would now be subject to forest conservation. We did an NRI for just parcel KK, and then we filed a forest conservation plan for parcel KK and understand the issues with applications and all that. But as you can imagine, having to do forest conservation compliance for 37 acres versus 3 acres is a huge delta. So hopefully there's a way we can work together to maybe figure out a way on this, somewhat atypical site to deal with that. Because, again, the applicant doesn't control all these properties. We don't have an NRI for the entire 37 acres. And, we were kind of going down this path that we thought was the right way. So I don't know if anybody else on the team has discussed that yet, but certainly something we want to talk about and see how we can reconcile that.
This is Rebecca with DOT. I don't understand exactly what their frontage is. I mean, do they actually have any street frontage?
It's
Yes.
about 100 feet or so. You can kind of, if you scroll down on the screen, you can see it, or somebody can pan down.
So isn't this a preliminary plan amendment?
Just to show the site frontage.
So the Rebecca, the preliminary plan is being amended to change the use on this parcel and to reflect what I'd say reshuffling of the density. There was like 800 and some thousand square feet of density approved. We're not changing that, but we're taking the density that was previously shown on this parcel and increasing it by 60,000. And then the site plan is being amended as well. So in terms of the preliminary plan, it's really just a change of use and reshuffling of approved density. And there's the frontage.
Yeah, real quickly, Rebecca, what's shown on the screen here, you can see the number 12, that's the parking quantity. So the site frontage is basically just to the east of the monumented driveway and then goes over to the other property line. There's a 9 parking quantity number just past that property line. So it's that very defined sliver right in the middle of the street.
If they have to meet the master plan intent, right?
Yes.
So in order to meet the master plan intent, you have to dedicate the additional right of way.
Yes.
And because it's all under one preliminary plan, then you'd have to dedicate the frontage along the entire property.
Yeah,
Problem
that was.
is, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, Rebecca, that's what we were discussing last week, and just defining the scope down to parcel KK, because that's the piece that's actually changing.
I mean, but I have a problem with the fact that it's a preliminary plan amendment for the entire, you're amending, it's one preliminary plan amendment, right? So shouldn't everything be included in that?
One of the issues is that the applicant doesn't own all the property out here. There's different owners. There's a different owner for every one of these parcels.
I just don't understand how we can't ask for the entire right-of-way dedication because it's an amendment for a preliminary plan. But that's, I mean, we need the 25 feet. We want to make sure that nobody builds within the master plan right-of-way, which I know you are showing a garage or something on another property that's supposedly in the master plan area. So
yeah, and I forgot to mention that. So there's a number of things. There's a parking garage, there's a building, there's a parking lot. There's a lot of things that were approved that we just are retaining on the plans to, not preclude those other property owners from losing an entitlement they have. Admittedly,
Okay.
there's little detail on some of them, but we're just keeping them on the plans. That's the
I'm
intention.
really
there.
glad you brought that up because we had a question about a lot of those. And we went through and we tried to find where those approvals were. And we couldn't do it. So I would really, we want to make certain that we get this cleaned up so that with the next amendment, no one is scratching their head and saying, well, why does this say proposed? Is it proposed or is it approved? And if it is approved, you know, do we have an accounting of square footage, of parking? Where is that?
It's all,
And-
yeah, we definitely have it. And admittedly, it's,
Great.
you know, that all this previous certified site plans have those tabulations in terms of parking and square footage and all that. Again, it's lacking some of the detail you'd see today with like elevations and landscaping and all this stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
I understand
but,
all
but
that.
we definitely have it.
On those previous site plans, it says proposed. It doesn't say approved. And so what I want to know is where was it actually approved? Because if it wasn't approved and it's not being approved with this amendment, then it needs to be removed.
Well, I think that
Because-
the plans that are stamped would be the approval. I don't know that the wording was changed when they certified the plans. The wording might not have changed from proposed to approved, but you know, it's the certified plans. So that would be taken, I think, as the approval, right? The stamped drawings show that stuff.
Thanks, Patrick. If I can just jump in, I think it sounds like what we want, Amy, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's just like a overall comprehensive picture of the site. We recognize, and I know, Rebecca, we met with you last week to kind of talk about it before this meeting. We recognize that you're not going to be able to do the transportation improvements on frontage that you frankly don't own and control. So we recognize that you'll be able to do the transportation improvements that are, you know, at the site entrances and exits where we flag them to make them ADA accessible, and then also at the frontage of this parcel, we would be asking for that dedication. But I just want to kind of make sure in this meeting we can be very clear about giving you direction as to what we expect for the transportation before we move on to another topic. Rebecca, is that also your understanding of what we discussed last week?
I was, to be honest, I was a little confused. I didn't remember exactly what we were asking for. But that sounds, if that's what you think that is appropriate, then that's fine.
Yeah, I think the problem is some of those entrances, like the right of way, the entrance is actually on private property. So at least a part of it, like if you look at Omega, for example. So, you know, some of that, although, you know, like you said, it's not controlled entirely by this applicant, so.
Well, they should at least try to make an effort to talk to them. I mean, you're doing improvements for somebody else that if they come in later. So I think you should try to do something, you know, talk to the other owners and actually see if and get something in written form if they aren't going to agree to you doing ADA improvements for them.
Okay, so it sounds like what we're saying is make an effort to please see if they'll allow you to do the improvements, and if they won't let you, then let us know in writing.
Okay.
But what we're asking for is, you know, within the property that's under your ownership, or that with all the information that you have, because it looks like we've been doing some digging, but we know that this is a very old approval dating back from what, the 80s? Is that right, Amy?
It is.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have very good records, but we just want to make sure we have the full picture, because we know that, you know, this area is just going to continue to grow as it has in the last few years. So having that information is really helpful for us as we, you know, see future reviews. So
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and you know, I think one thing I was going to ask you guys was, what we've been trying. We do have like these bigger picture views. I think we can add some more language and labels on the plans to show, you know, what was approved when and what's built and not built. We can definitely do that. One thing I sort of in that realm I wanted to ask, and sorry to get in the weeds on this, but you know, the thinking here was that parcel KK, because from a site plan perspective, not preliminary plan, but from a site plan perspective, we are increasing the density more than the prescribed limits. We do have to change to the new current zoning. So we broke down all of the very new detailed zoning requirements for parcel KK in this table you see on the screen. We did not do the same for all the other parcels because we're not actually bringing those up to speed. Our thinking there was that as all those other parcels get redeveloped, the same thing would happen. You'd sort of have these sheets get inserted where, okay, now parcel LL, here's all of its development standards under current zoning at the time. Because we're not, reassessing the entire site in the EOF zone. We're just really that the intention was just to bring parcel KK up that way. So again, that's getting in the weeds. I think we can work together maybe offline with some of that, but hopefully if that works for you, that's kind of the general path forward. We were thinking here is just to sort of, understand that in the future, as other sites get work done or redeveloped, they'll have to sort of add to this new set.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that we often need to do in the Great Seneca area because we have staging requirements in that area that are quite specific at this time. So the tracking of the transfer of density is super important. And, it's something that other applicants have done. And we include that in the staff report so that it's publicly available and we have that information. And it also then goes into our tracking for the Great Seneca area generally. So yeah, all this information is really helpful. I guess I think we've talked about transportation. Maybe we can now switch to the urban design of the public park area. And if we don't have all the folks we need in this call, because I understand that Pat Harris is not here, from the applicant side, we can certainly have that conversation next week. But did you want to try to have that conversation now, Patrick?
Sure, yeah. We do have our design team. We have representatives from HOK,
Okay.
both landscape architects and architects on the line. So certainly if we want to get into any of that, by all means.
So to kind of summarize, this is Natasha Fahim. I'm an urban designer of Mid County. To summarize our design comments for the proposal, I think some of the comments were related to the loading at the back on the eastern portion of the site, where it's very close to your secondary entryway. So we were asking if it's possible you make that loading as close as 90 degrees as possible, and pushing it towards south, the bottom of this drawing, to be further from the secondary entryway. Also screening the transformer close to the loading area. We also had some comments regarding the design of the oval green on the western portion of your site and how all of those paved area are getting connected to the surrounding office. Some of them are not connecting to anything, so we were hoping that you can minimize the amount of paved area and save the mature tree as much as possible and create a focal kind of like gathering space in a center where the both offices on the east and west, parcel Z and KK, are getting connected to each other. So those are kind of like overall design comment that we had, and we had some minor requests on the facade improvement and making the ground floor perceived taller and create like a more prominent canopy over the two entryway that you are proposing on the east and the west side. So I'm more than happy to discuss what you guys are thinking of our comments and how we can move forward.
Sure. If we want to start with the oval, we agree with the comments about preserving mature trees, and we care about that a lot. And part of the strategy for the way we are arranging and the site and the axis is kind of like preserving the main trees, especially those maple trees that are on both sides of this axis. And the whole strategy for the landscape is creating this central gathering space that is connecting the new building and the existing building. That's why there's our connections to the on going northeast and then connecting the 9513 and the 9501. And we also care about existing amenities. So the axis is leading to the south, to where the amenity space will be located on the new building, and also is suggesting a connection to the pond on the northwest side of the site. We agreed that we can make more strong that and work like to make that connection from 9513 to 9501. And in terms of what's on the south tip of the oval, the design intent for that part is that it becomes an arrival plaza. That's the first space that you see when you arrive, and we are actually introducing new trees. There is new shade trees, and we're considering it's more like a flexible space. Is what you see when you arrive, and then we still introduce new trees. We have bioretention facilities, and that all plays together with existing trees and preserving the existing canopy. Roger, do you like to talk about the loading area?
Before we move on, I just wanted to add to what Natasha had said, and I think Amy stated that in her comments as well. We appreciate the improvements that are being proposed. Certainly appreciate the sort of axial connection that you all are proposing as well. I think some of our concerns are, making sure that not too many trees are being taken out. So we need to understand better what trees are being retained and what are being planted as new trees. And then in terms of gathering spaces, we certainly wholeheartedly support the idea that there should be some sort of central gathering spaces. In our experience, those spaces function best when they have a certain amount of volume to them and have well-protected edges that make people feel comfortable in that space. So that central space, for example, we think that'll be a wonderful space for people to sit. And if you want to make an entry statement on the bottom end of the oval on the drawing, we appreciate that as well. We just don't think that would be a sort of enclosed and comfortable enough of a space that people will actually spend time there. I think most of the people are going to want to be in the middle of the space where they feel more enclosed, more protected, and visually connected to the lobbies. So just rethinking maybe that southern edge and continuing to maintain that sense of arrival, which we support, but perhaps concentrating some of the seating in a more centralized location and really working on that east-west axis between the two buildings, as we see on the drawing, are things that we would recommend, and really minimizing paving where we absolutely need it for supporting some flexible seating would be our sort of design suggestions. And we're happy to work with you all to get to a place that works for everybody.
So just to further on what Harold was talking about, my name is Roger Schwabacher. I'm the design principal with HOK's office in Washington, D.C. So I'm the designer of this project, and Harold is the designer of the landscape. I just wanted to further what he was talking about. So the east-west connection, so that main plaza that you guys are talking about in the middle is connecting the two main lobbies. So the lobby of 9513 and 9501. But in addition to those functions, we also have amenity spaces on the ground floor of 9501. And these amenity spaces are for multiple buildings. It's not just for 9501, but it's really for buildings across the site that's owned by this owner. So if you see the plaza south of the entry plaza, directly adjacent to the building, that's an outdoor seating area for our food, for our cafe area, for our conferencing area. So we have this blurring of indoor-outdoor spaces where we have a cafe on the inside. The wall can open up as an operable exterior wall to this outdoor seating. And what we were trying to do with the central oval is extend that feeling of openness and seating across to the main central space of the campus. So our feeling is that the landscape, while we're not doing improvements to all the buildings around, all the existing buildings, we were hoping that the landscape could be that thing that knit the campus together, and those outdoor amenity spaces, which we're finding really attract, especially the younger generations to this kind of development, would be that thing that binds people and attracts people to this campus. So we have the outdoor eating area, which comes across to the central oval and outdoor spaces. We have outdoor workstations in that central oval. The oval today, is just a scrubby kind of grassy thing with some very mature trees, which we're saving. And we really want to now occupy that space. Right now, it's just sort of a placeholder space. And we want to make it an amenity at the center, at the heart of this whole thing. So that's a little bit more of an explanation of why we're extending the paved area from that central area, which connects the lobbies, to the south, so it's directly adjacent to the outdoor seating area and some of the amenities for this campus.
Yeah, Roger, thank you for explaining it further. Like, we totally appreciate all the amenity that you guys bringing to this oval. Like, as we look at the existing, it's just like a very passive grassy area, as you explained. So bringing those kind of, I think, at the north of the oval, you're creating some outdoor seating that for the office workers, that they can, like, workstations, and then at the edge of the office building, you're providing like outdoor seating. So those are all like great amenities that help activate the green. Like our concept or like our comments kind of like trying to minimize or concentrate all of these to their potential location. So like not necessarily that outdoor cafe seating should have like access to the oval from bottom and from the north. So if you are sitting in a cafe and you want to get to the oval, you can easily go to where the lobby hatching is, the paved area, and get to the oval. So that's what like we thought that maybe the bottom seating area and the paved area and the oval is kind of like unnecessary and arbitrary. So that the comment was coming from that. But as far as like providing active uses, workout station, like workstations on the oval and the outdoor seating, those are all great amenities.
Yeah, I mean, so what I was trying to explain, I appreciate your comments, and I understand them, but what I was trying to explain is it's not arbitrary that we have that diagonal across the site. The diagonal across the site leading to the main amenity space is quite intentional, because that's where a lot of the traffic might go. So instead of entering through the lobby, they'll enter through, we have exterior doors from that outdoor seating area directly into the amenity spaces. We were trying to have the design reflect the functions of where people from various buildings would be traveling. So it's, not a circuitous route, directly to the lobby and then taking a 90-degree turn. We're having, the paths follow where people would travel. And we're really trying to have this central oval connect all the buildings. This is the heart of the site now, and we really want to activate it and have, people enjoy having that blurring of indoor, outdoor, having these outdoor amenities. We want this to be an amenity for all the buildings around there and not just parcel KK.
Yeah, Roger, thank you. I think some more colored and rendered landscape drawings and some three-dimensional imagery explaining all of this will be very helpful.
We have all that, yeah.
And if we have this design idea that you want to create a strong connection between the internal parts of the building to this outdoor terrace to the oval, then I think we would then suggest that that connection needs to be a little bit stronger and fortified, so that when you're coming from that diagonal and crossing the sidewalk, you're not just ending at driveways, right? So if that is such an important design element, then let's try to reflect that in the treatment of the drive aisles across that connection and really try to boost that. But as a starting point, I think some rendered plans and some three-dimensional imagery that shows all these different amenities and where the location is, what the size of that is, would be very helpful. I think you guys have shared a lot more information today than what is apparent from the drawing. So I think another round might be helpful on that.
And I'm really happy to hear you focusing on pedestrian connections, because that was what a lot of our transportation comments were going towards, were improvements to make this a much more pedestrian-friendly area and sort of bring this up to from sort of an old school office park into a more contemporary, something that's much more pedestrian focused, and really looking at how we can start to achieve, our sector plan goals, our Vision Zero goals. How can we do all of that while still working within your framework?
Thank you for that, Amy. I totally agree. I think the design team and the whole team for Parcel KK totally agree. I mean, the reason we even extended the pavers across the roads in the areas where you see them, in the road, is a traffic calming measure. Not just visually, but also, when you go over pavers, you get a little bit of rumble, you slow down. We want to make this a pedestrian friendly zone and not oriented towards cars. So perhaps extending that down to capture that diagonal would make some sense. The other thing I think, I'm not sure we discussed, but it needs to be understood, is this site plan and section and how it's all working. We do have various bioretention areas around the building to keep the stormwater on the site and to recharge the local aquifers around the site. So we're not putting the stormwater back into the storm system, but recharging the water. So that affects the section, and those are lowered areas to collect that stormwater. So some of that outdoor seating, like the outdoor seating all the way on the southwest, is a little island within this bioretention area. So it's a more private area for people of the various buildings to sit amongst greenery within a garden. So as we think about that connection from the oval towards our building, you have to think about, you have to cross with almost bridges over these bioretentions to make it work.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that you are thinking about the bioretention area as helping frame space, because that is something that makes a huge difference in the property and the design, is when a bioretention area is just, for example, there's one right in this area, and it's just kind of kidney shaped, but you can use that to help frame your space, just like you did over here. And we want to make certain that we see that, because a lot of times designers just, bioretention gets put in space, whatever's left over.
Yeah,
we want to see that really kind of used, just like you did there, and I think that's wonderful.
So I'm sorry, Amy, were you pointing to something? I didn't. Where was the kidney shaped one you were mentioning?
It's right about here. That's shown on other plans. There's one in here, and that's kind of, contributing to the tree loss.
Yeah. I mean, we were concentrating on the ones on our parcel and KK, and instead of putting them in the back or something hidden or something fenced, we're actually embracing them as part of the landscape scheme. So you interact with these bioretention areas, which would be dry the majority of the time. And then at times of rain, it collects water from the roof and recharges it. So it's really part of the front door experience. And we really made the ground floor of the building very glassy. So you have those views between nature and the interior space, what's called biophilia. So you really, the views and connection to nature is part of health and well-being of the people on this site.
Wonderful. So we've got to wrap up now. I would really strongly suggest that we talk again next Tuesday. That is the time we've got held on people's schedules, and I quite frankly don't think I could pull a meeting together before then. So to keep this on schedule for meeting the a planning board date of July 6th, which would be a first resubmittal on the 12th of April, and the final resubmittal on the 2nd of May. I would suggest that we circle back next Tuesday.
So
I need to know, Pat, who needs to be there? Do you still need to talk to DOT? We still have some transportation issues to talk about. Do we still need, who else do we need?
I think if we have, I think we'll probably want to circle back on the transportation stuff. I think really it's just planning staff and DOT. I mean, we now have an approved stormwater concept. Someone from DPS is probably on the line. They don't need to be there. I think Marie LaBalle's comments were straightforward. Pepco's comments, I think all that stuff is pretty easy. So unless anybody disagrees, I'm thinking just, perhaps park and planning staff and DOT would be all we really need, but anybody could certainly listen in.
Okay, so it sounds like you still have the forest conservation discussion and the transportation discussion.
Yeah, and I think the forest conservation, we didn't really touch a lot on that, but I'm not sure if there's any discussions to be had on your end about that, but certainly any way we can, work together on that, because it's a big ticket item when you look at 37 acres of various properties and so forth. One thing I floated out, just brainstorming ideas was, would there be an opportunity to do like a PFCP where we sort of set the phasing, if you will, for the campus and then only implement what we're developing, i.e. parcel KK, to keep that exposure down. But we can get into those weeds next week, perhaps.
Okay. All right. We need to wrap up. So thank you, everybody. And we will send out a meeting invitation for next week within the next couple of days.
Okay, thank you.
DRC meeting for 15601 Crabs Branch Way. I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and your lead reviewer is Troy Leftwich. The purpose of this meeting is to answer any questions you might have based upon the comments that you received. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and I will turn it over to Troy first to just highlight any of the major comments, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant. Go ahead, Troy.
This project is essentially a subdivision between one existing lot, existing building. The Red Cross building looks to subdivide into looks like they're going to demo at least a portion of the existing structure to set up the separation between those two lots. There seems to be, I guess, the comments from the pre-DRC was essentially the rear accessory building. I think that zoom in a little bit. There's questions about this meeting the setback requirements, so we just need to kind of address that. If there's any original entitlements that kind of address how that structure was there, we probably need to kind of investigate that a little bit more. Also, since you are creating a new lot, both lots will have to be in compliance. There's also frontage improvements, as you can see within the comments that were provided. It looks like we'll be asking for at least 11-foot side path improvement. Looks like everything would be can fit within the right of way. So now we're not asking for any dedication for that roadway improvement, but that is part of the complete streets and master plan bikeway improvements that we look for, for any particular project that's coming in for any type of improvement. And then I know there's some comments in regards of fire and rescue, in regards of access, and I think there may be some options. And then another major comment was also removing the internal or the central access point into the property. So that's kind of the big items, at least that I'm aware of. But we can definitely turn it over to the applicant at this time to kind of highlight anything that they saw within the comments that I didn't address.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jose Barral, civil engineer with KPFF, representing the American Red Cross on this subdivision. And yes, you're right. I have a question about those two major comments. First, about what is called accessory building. That is actually a mechanical building where they have the chillers and also a generator for emergency power cutoff. So being that a mechanical building, it still have to comply with the requirements as a accessory building. That is my question. This one.
Is it fully enclosed like a roof and a wall?
No, the west side of the building is open and it have, I believe, two chillers. And then on the right side, it have a small enclosure where the generator and daily fuel tank is in place.
So you said the west side doesn't have a wall or is open?
No, it have a wall that surrounds the perimeter, but it's not covered.
Okay, so the west side of the building is not covered, or is the entire building not?
No, I think half of the building is not covered where the chillers are. The chillers are exposed to air, and then the east corner is where there is a small room with a generator.
Got it. Okay, let's look at it a little bit more, and then we can kind of confirm with zoning at DPS and just circle that issue in regards of the requirements of that setback, just to get an answer. We probably won't get an answer to that today, but we can get an answer to you in the next couple of days.
Melissa, do you have any comments on that?
So I just joined the meeting. I heard that part of it's open. We would probably need some photographs, but if it's, yeah, to see, and also it would need to be noted somewhere so we can tell what the setbacks are. Because it's not shown as a wall, it says it's a building.
I on the survey is, but yes, I can get some image from Google, or I can go to the site, take some photos, and provide as a supplemental information on this.
Okay, but we're just asking for it to meet the setbacks if you are gonna apply for any permit later for this demolished area in between the buildings, the main building. If you're demolishing that area at the time of permitting, you just need to show compliance for this existing building. So you don't need to show it now. It's at the time of permitting.
Let me share the screen for the group so everybody can see the. So this is the area we're talking about. So it looks like the whole thing is open air, which is on Google Earth. You could even get you could get all the way around.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
So what's the height of the wall?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I didn't even know that you could go to Street View there. I didn't try that. Are you planning to remove this enclosed area?
I think the enclosed area we can remove and get rid of it, but the chillers definitely is going to be a major change for the mechanical system of the building.
Okay, so yeah, the wall is over 6 feet 6 inches too, so it doesn't comply. It has to meet a setback if it's that tall. I would keep the same comments on that.
So is any way we can keep the chillers where they are? I mean, based on your comment, we will have to move the chillers somewhere else, right?
Is the solution that if the wall is removed, like if there's replaced with some type of security fence, does that meet the requirement? And it's really the wall that's the issue, the structure of the wall that's the issue, more than it is the mechanical elements?
We
Okay,
were
well,
gonna review this at the time of permitting, so you could send us a request, but we wouldn't be reviewing it now, and we just said you may need a variance from the Board of Appeals for approval.
Okay, so let me ask you, what would be the maximum height that we can keep on that wall? Let's say that we can demolish the top of the wall, keep it low, and put maybe a chain link fence or something around the perimeter on top of the wall. Would that be an acceptable solution for that?
Give me just one moment, please.
All right, so Melissa's looking into that, but I do think you're gonna have to have further conversations with Melissa. This is a concept plan, so it's done after this meeting. So nothing further happens after this meeting, but you can have individual conversations with Melissa to figure this piece out.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, I will get in touch and try to find a solution for that. Then the other question I have, was mentioned, is the removal of the driveway in the center of the facility or the site. On the side, yes. Is there a way that we can keep that driveway there? Our concern is in the future, we don't know what the future owner of the West Wing will be doing with that property. And I think that middle entrance, if we can keep, we facilitate the access, egress to the side, coming out on the other side. Would be possible to keep that driveway there, anything that we should do in order to be able to keep it?
Yeah, I think the issue with the access point there in the middle is that it's offset from the intersection on the other side of the street. And the zoning code has a limitation on how many access points you can have given a certain linear footage for frontage. So we were concerned about the geometry of the existing access point and then also the number of curb cuts. So it was our recommendation that that one be eliminated.
But let's say in the future, or not far from now, we decide to obstruct the access between the parking on the east wing to the west lot or parcel. Then we will have only one access to the side.
Would it be possible to shift that center access point so that it directly aligns with the street across the way?
Well, yes, that could be an option, and then it's going to be a common access for the two parcels. Yep.
I think the concern there would be that there's a pedestrian crosswalk there, and so there might be some safety issues with turning vehicles into that driveway so close to that crossing. That would be, I think, something you'd have to look at and relocating that drive access. I think, especially since there's a side path from the bike master plan on this location, reduction of access points is a better approach because you have less conflicts with pedestrians.
Okay. Another question: would it be recommended to have two access to each parcel, or one would be enough?
I think one would be fine. We wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay. So then we're going to consider to remove that, and then when time comes, if they decide to close the connection between the two properties, then that should be fine. Or we can come with a different approach if needed, a second access. But that's fine. So we're going to consider to close that driveway.
Okay, do you have any other questions?
There are a few multiple comments on transportation. Especially, well, one of the comments is about having the bike lane along the sidewalk. So what we're talking about is to widen the sidewalk to be 9 feet, right? Along Crabs Branch Way.
It'd be an 11-foot side path with a buffer from the street. It's a side path, so to accommodate both pedestrians and bicyclists.
So, but how much would be the buffer? I don't know not sure about I believe what we have is 6 and 9. So if we make it 11, we will end up with a 4-foot planter strip, right?
Hi, this is Billy Whalen from DOT. Yes, with the path coming off the right of way, you can have as little as, we prefer, a 2-foot maintenance strip, but you could go to 1 foot. And so then you'd have the path and the remaining from the path to the curb as your buffer.
Okay, let me ask you something. That improvement will have to be done in order to get the subdivision of the site approved, or that would be a work that can be later on?
No, it would be part of the preliminary plan.
Yeah, it'd be a condition of the subdivision. Yep.
Okay. And then the current owner will have to build that pathway, right? Or that would be something that you guys, I mean, as city will be doing.
No, the owner would do it, applicant.
The applicant will have to do all the improvement on the public.
Correct, with all
Outside of the public.
all the right-of-way improvements.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Yes, no, that's important for me to know so I can inform the owner. Yes, that's one thing. Another comment was about the stormwater management. So do we need to separate the stormwater management for both sites at this time?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. There's only one stormwater management practice on the site right now, and it's at the very south end. It's an oil grit separator, so I wouldn't worry about the existing stormwater management. If you are required to do enough improvements as part of the subdivision process that you're going to disturb over 5,000 square feet, then you'll have to do a stormwater management concept for the new work and address stormwater management in however we decide to do it. But we wouldn't worry about anything to do with the existing stormwater management. That would stay in place, and I believe the easement would still stay valid.
Right, the east should be fine, but then the west, I believe, is discharging up to outside of our property. So it seems like it's an easement there. I mean, you can see the opening, storm drainage easement.
Are you talking about storm drainage, or are you talking about stormwater management?
Well, I would say both of them. Storm drainage is working as is now. We don't have any issue, but if stormwater management will be required on the west wing, then we will have to do some kind of design here or concept for detention or retention or as needed.
Yeah, you'd be looking at ESD practices like maybe microbial retention practices. If the soils are good, they'd be pretty minor. I don't think I would. This isn't a large redevelopment project. I don't think it would be a difficult process to get an acceptable stormwater management concept approved for this. Even if it had to include a portion of some waiver element, we could work with that because it really isn't part of a larger design element. I'm sure there's something that could be determined. It wouldn't be for the whole site. It would just be for the new work that was being required as part of the subdivision at this point. If there were other improvements that were planned down the road to the site, then those would be reviewed under their own, merit. But anything associated with this subdivision would have to provide stormwater if the disturbance exceeded 5,000 square feet as part of those requirements. And we could find some parking or something that we could probably treat to a level that would be commensurate with the work that's being done. But that would be a stormwater concept, and then it would be detailed plans.
Well, as you can see, all we're planning to do at this time is demolish the space between the two buildings to separate them.
There's a lot of talk about moving the entrance around and changing the parking at the entrance and that kind of thing. And if that work were to, and putting a 11-foot path along the frontage of the property, if that work were to entail over 5,000 square feet of disturbance, stormwater management would be required for that work.
All right.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything that I would make you do if you were just demolishing a couple of ends of the buildings and changing the lots. There wouldn't be anything to do. But if the work entailed in that exceeds the 5,000 square feet, then we'd be looking at stormwater management for that.
All right. It makes sense. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. Do you have one last quick question or?
No, I think we are fine. There are a few comments about fire department, so I think we can address that later. So our next step would be to revise the plans and prepare a preliminary plans, right?
Yeah, you would essentially put in a request for a checklist, and then that would determine the process, and that will go to Matt Foden, our supervisor, and then that will set the stage for your next steps. I don't know if an NRI or a forest conservation plan would be for this, but you would have that part of that process too. So essentially, NRI will be probably your first step. Then you will have a preliminary plan and a forest conservation plan tied to that. And then that would be the process in regards of determining the steps to get to your subdivision application.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
Bye.
the DRC meeting for 1204 Dale Drive. I am Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And your lead reviewer is Marco Fuster, who is pulling up the plan momentarily. The purpose of this meeting is to answer any questions that you might have based upon the comments you received. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and I'm going to ask Marco to just briefly highlight any of the major comments we should talk about and then turn it over to the applicant. So go right ahead, Marco.
Well, the project has, the project area has major environmental constraints, and pointed out in the comments under the subdivision regulations 54.3K, we wouldn't be able to make the finding to support the subdivision. And it doesn't seem that there's any changes that would make it supportable either. So just a major red flag there. Otherwise, there's a number of issues that could be worked through, but with that major red flag, we don't see how this can go forward.
So that's a good place to start. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so if is anyone from DPS zoning there?
Yes, good morning. This is Melissa speaking.
Hey, Melissa. All right, so perfect. So you had issued a comment regarding the setback placement for this particular subdivision. So one of the kind of quirky things that we ran into with this, and Marco, I'm going to come back to you if that's okay. I'd like to get this part clarified first. But one of the things that we ran into was the fact that this is an older subdivision. If you were developing on this today, you would be subject to the pre-54 side setbacks for the zone, so 7 and 7 in this case. And the existing house that's constructed on the site sits approximately 7 foot 8 inches off the side setback. So that's the 1204 on page left there. And we were concerned we would have to get a variance if we went through the subdivision process on this particular site, because there was a question about what setback limits would be enforced as part of the preliminary plan. Would it go to the 818 or would it stay at 7.7 for the existing house only? Is that something you can clarify? Because the way I read your comment, it sounds like the existing lot could, or the house or the new lot that's around the existing house would be 7 and 7, whereas the new house would obviously, or the new lot would obviously be constructed with the 8 and 18.
Yeah, any addition, the existing house has a 7 foot setback, which is fine. But any addition or any new construction, when you apply for permits, has to meet that 8 foot that you're showing on your plan.
Okay, so that was very critical when we were putting this together, because that influenced where we placed the division line between the two lots. So what it sounds like I'm hearing is that we could maintain 7 and 7 for what's proposed lot 1 in this case. So we could move that division line to the west by, I think, something like 4.5 feet, plus or minus.
No, any new construction, the new house has to meet the new setbacks.
Right.
So, yeah,
Understood.
even if you were to rebuild this house, if this was an infill lot proposed later, you're going to have to meet the new setbacks because it's part of the subdivision and it's going to be on a record plat after today's date.
Right. So the existing house that is not proposed to be redeveloped, that house is proposed to remain. Would that be required? Would the dividing setback line be required to be 7 foot off that house or farther?
For the current house, it's 7 feet side yards, correct?
Okay, so the subdivision would be looked at for proposed lot 1. The existing house would be allowed to remain at 7 and 7.
Yep, I had our zoning manager look at it. She agreed with that.
Okay, that's because I got some different information when I inquired about that prior, but that's beneficial to me because what that does is that gives us, some additional environmental, or, sort of less sensitive environmental area to play with. I mean, because that center line was established to essentially get as close to the 8 and 18 requirement as possible. So we could
How
move.
How would they meet the new setback with additions or a new house in the future?
I mean, I don't. There's no intention of redeveloping that house. So the house could be smaller, but I don't think there's any intention of redeveloping 1204.
But you have to look at the lot width requirements as well in the zoning ordinance. So is that why you had it wider?
We had it wider. Basically, the way that I established the middle line was I looked at what the projection requirements were, what was existing as a projection. So she's Diane Tate is the owner and the applicant. She's on the call, but she has a covered deck or a covered porch on the side there. And we established the center line based on a 3-foot permissible projection for that covered porch. And then basically offset that. I think it was 11.25 feet. That gave us 18 in total inside setbacks for this lot. With a 7.
Talking about lot width.
I'm sorry?
60 feet. Did you design this lot to be 60 feet exactly in width?
Let me see. I think it's wider.
Okay, you just have to take a look at that. I don't have those numbers on here.
Yeah. Understood. But so if I'm understanding correctly, I can look at that for sure. If I'm understanding correctly, however, we could abide by 7 and 7 on for proposed lot 1 for the existing house, assuming it meets the lot width requirement and all other bulk, typical bulk zoning requirements.
Yes, the existing house has a side setback of 7 feet minimum on each side.
Okay. So that kind of takes me over to, I guess, my second question is for DOT and also sort of, I guess, probably also partially for Marco and his team. There's a call for an 80-foot right-of-way, so a 10-foot dedication out front. This particular plat had a expanded front setback from what's currently permissible, for what's currently the minimum within the zone. And so, and I know there's an EBL requirement and that kind of thing, but so if Diane goes and dedicates 10 foot on the front of the property there, how would that impact the fact, would that be taken into account with sort of the front setback requirement? Would that be kind of laid in with what was in the existing plat prior so that there's sort of house conformance along the street?
All right, so is the question after the dedication, does that affect the EBL? Is that the question?
The question is, basically the question is the plat has a 50-foot, the overall plat has a 50-foot front setback, which is larger than what's per zone. So, again, I understand their environmental regulations. So hypothetically, if the subdivision were allowed to proceed, would there still be an enforced 50-foot front BRL on that, or would it be because she's dedicating, or would that be reduced to 40-foot to match what's existing along sort of the remainder of the street?
Just reduce the EBL would stay constant.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and the setback would be from where the new dedication would be.
Right.
So
I don't know why there's a 50-foot on it. I mean, you're gonna have to replat both anyway, so.
Correct.
So it'd be a new plat, and the setback would start from the right of way, the new dedicated right of way.
Okay. So it would likely end up being, because it's 50-foot prescribed per plat on the original plat drawing, it would likely be 40-foot prescribed per plat because of the 10-foot dedication. So that would be in conformance with the remainder of the street.
We can look to see if there's any notes on why there was a 50-foot EBL in the first place. My guess is that there's some sort of environmental thing, in which case, that's not moving. So we're trying to I understand the question that you're asking, but I think we can give you a tentative yes, because we didn't see that on the plat ourselves, but I think you're on the right track.
Okay. And it's the same thing with the side. I mean, the side had a 40-foot setback, which is, significantly larger than any typical side setback in this type of zone. Okay. So I think
Katie's right, though. I think given the environmental issues on the
existing lot, my guess is that's probably why it was done.
Well, I mean, I would agree with you on this lot, but it's the same for the entire street. Like the whole street was created that way. So I mean, it doesn't really matter. I just want to make sure that, that staff isn't going to hold, again, hypothetically, if this subdivision goes, I know there's other issues, but hypothetically, if it went forward, that staff isn't going to enforce a 50-foot setback on this new lot, because that's in keeping with what's on the existing plat. I think we're all on the same page, though. From an EBL standpoint, it's going to make sense where everything is to keep sort of the same setback line kind of where it needs to be. But I was concerned about that with the dedication component associated with it. So. Okay. So I guess lastly, Marco, your comments were very well taken in terms of the environmental restrictions on the site. We were aware of that going in, that there was going to be some environmental concerns with this particular site. Based on the commentary from DPS zoning, I would want to consider, making an adjustment to the property line, again, assuming the lot width is good, where I could push everything over a little bit further to try and make a reasonably sized house on this on a secondary piece of property. Obviously, I don't know if staff is going to be able to come to the environmental findings needed to get to that point, but I mean, is there a potential for mitigation there, or is this just sort of a?
Doug, I don't know if moving it 4 feet is gonna solve the problem. I mean, you're more than welcome to obviously take a look. I think, Marco laid out, we have serious concerns that if this were to come in as is, we would not support it.
Okay. What if I'm
also, along with that, not sure if Marie LeBaugh is on the line at this point, but her comments indicated that unless you could address certain distances relative to the street or the fire hydrant, you needed a 15-foot setback on the new lot, whereas you only have 8. So even if you could gain a little room based on what you have shown, you would also lose room based on those comments.
Well, hang on, the 15-foot setback would be, would be required if you don't want to create a fire department compliant shared driveway. If you get your shared driveway constructed with the 35-foot apron and the 20-foot pavement width to within 50 feet of the front door of the house, then you can maintain the setbacks as they are. But to create that driveway is a significant impact to this site. So the better alternative would be to do the 15-foot BRLs setbacks. But I don't see that you have the space for one or the other.
Yeah, and Marie, thank you for that. I mean, ultimately, I don't see setbacks are so tight on this particular subdivision. The environmental regulations are really sort of governing here. So I think we would have to look to work with you on that on the compliant driveway more than anything, which would be a challenge, of course, but it's something that I think maybe is a little more feasible than some of the environmental concerns associated. So those are largely my questions. I mean, Marco, is there anything else in terms of the environmental restrictions that would be permissible, or that would staff be willing to even take a look at that or consider that, if the house was moved to, it would be the east and the property line was moved to the east, again, assuming that, all the other bulk restrictions are met? Or is that something that you're really not even willing to consider?
Well, the language under 54.3K seems doesn't really seem to have the wiggle room. Of course, there's all the overlapping concerns and the environmental guidelines. So I don't see room for it to happen.
I mean, Doug, you're more than welcome to, look at it and send something to staff and we'll take a look.
Okay.
our concern also is if you go the route of a 35-foot driveway, I'm not sure how we feel.
Yeah, I'll echo that.
Thank you, Katie, on something that wide in a residential neighborhood.
Plus, Melissa is adding into the comments that there's restrictions on the amount of surface parking you can have in the front yard.
Sure.
You need to keep that in mind.
Of course. And I mean, one thing that comes to mind off of that is, what if we eliminated the shared driveway?
Right, and I think that would probably be a better way to go, honestly, because these U-shaped driveways are not things that we are, we don't like them. and I understand.
No, I'm aware. Yeah, I've heard that.
And that's the whole point of a concept plan. Totally get it. And so I think you're hearing us, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, from a dedication standpoint, just again, operating under the assumption that, we're somehow able to work through some of the environmental regs associated. I mean, from a dedication standpoint, you'd be looking for, it looks like a 10-foot PUE in the front, sidewalk as well within the area of dedication. It doesn't look like it, but is there any plans to expand this roadway?
Right. So there is a CIP project for the opposite side of the road to install a side path. In terms of expanding the road's capacity, no. But there are going to be some shifts because what we're trying to do on that opposite side is both accommodate a buffered side path as well as trying to preserve as much on-street parking as possible because not every lot has on-site parking. So I can't speak to the exact parameters of where MCDOT's project goes, but it is available publicly. So hence one of my comments was encouraging both in your cross section and on your actual, assuming this is an administrative subdivision, showing that other project, showing how it fits in.
Okay, excellent.
Doug, this is Deepak here with DOT. I had a comment to coordinate with Angel Chang regarding that project. So you may want to reach out to her to see the limits and the plans for that project.
Great. Yeah, and I got that. I see that comment in here. Thank you, Deepak. I appreciate that. Okay. Diane, do you have any questions specifically for the group here?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to answer questions and meet with Doug and myself. My goal with this project really is to provide an additional home for my daughter and to keep my family close to me. So, we're willing to work through as much as we can here with you. And it sounds like the environmental concerns are some of the biggest issues. Could you share some of the largest concerns there with us?
Sure. Under, this is spelled out in the comments, but under 54.3K 2B or IV, there's it indicates that the planning board can approve a lot that contains floodplain or environmentally, or unsafe land on a lot, but that a 25-foot buffer must be implemented. So you have both, not just one or the other, but you have both that overlap. So it'd be, don't see a way of coming in with something less than the 25-foot buffer off of that constrained land. So once you project the 25-foot buffer out from I could trace it out. So in here you have the steep slopes, highly erodible soils, and the wetland buffer, and some other things. But under that provision, the unsafe land or the floodplain, and again, you have both that go right along this area being traced out, must have a 25-foot buffer, which puts you all the way out to here. So there's as shown on the plan right now, the land constrained space is in this little sliver right here. And depending how fire access requirements go, the constraint would be all the way in here somewhere. So it's just this little tiny unconstrained square. So that's the major, that's the biggest hurdle.
So, Marco, we got the wetland buffer from the environmental consultant. I mean, the wetlands are mapped down in the low spot down there. Okay, so that's where we're showing that right there, that WB line. Obviously,
Right.
the floodplain extends significantly higher, but I mean, my understanding, and perhaps I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you can develop within the 25-foot floodplain buffer, provided you meet all the floodplain district permit requirements. Whereas I understand you can't develop within the wetland buffer. So is this a permitting issue, or is this just a staff findings issue? Staff can't physically find that this would be a suitable development, because it seems like you could find a way to permit it. That's my interpretation.
So probably the example you're speaking of, where other instances where building has occurred in a floodplain or floodplain buffer, that's most likely on land that the board isn't looking at. Like say, there's numerous existing recorded lots that don't need to go through subdivision and could go straight to permit. And under a scenario like that, you could work with other agencies to get that permitted. But here, since you have to go through the subdivision, it opens you up to the environmental guidelines and the subdivision regulations. And in there, for the reference, I keep mentioning that's where you hit a roadblock that would be very difficult or perhaps impossible to get past.
Got it. So it's a planning issue. It's not a permit issue. It's a planning issue.
It's a code issue for
Right.
subdivision code and
Subdivision issue. Okay, yeah. When I say planning, I mean park and planning,
and
MNCDPC.
environmental guidelines. And I think per it says that it has to go to the planning board, correct? Only the board can make that finding. So even if it came in as administrative, it would be going to the planning board.
Right, I
Okay.
mean, those provisions are in the code to keep people safe, so there's that.
Right. No, understood. I mean, okay. I'll stop beating that dead horse. So, all right. I don't have any further questions at this time. Marco, if I had something else come up, could I give you a shout just if something crazy happened and I give you a call?
Sure, anytime.
Okay, awesome. Diane, do you have anything further?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to all staff members. I appreciate that. We appreciate that review very much. We appreciate the comments, and we don't have anything further. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. I am Christina Sorrento. I am the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. This is a discussion item at DRC for Brookstone Senior Living. Your lead reviewer is Mark Beal, and he is going to bring up the plans. And he just asked for this to be added so that we can discuss some issues with the applicant and with all the agencies here. I'll turn it over to Mark.
Good morning, Mark Beal, lead reviewer for Brookstone. I emailed most of the comments to Sue yesterday, I believe. We got a senior living facility with independent living in the front, assisted living in the middle, and then memory care towards the back. We got a parking lot surrounding 3 sides of it. This is the applicant's chance to ask any questions. So, do you have any questions?
So yes, thank you. Sue Lee Cho, I think I know everyone in the room. It's hard to see who's there. Is it Josh Penn? Can we go just in the room, maybe who's in the room so I know?
Christina, Sam, Josh, Chris, Mark, Robert.
Chris, Mark, Robert.
Cronenberg, our deputy.
Cronenberg. Oh, okay. There are a couple Roberts over there, so just want to make sure. Great. So yes, this is a conditional use application, and we actually met with Mark and his colleagues in I guess urban design. Is that the right way to describe the group? And got some comments on just the site layout and the building, and the team is sort of still taking those comments in and trying to come up with some options or solutions, and we'll be planning to come back to you, Mark, to try to get a meeting back together in short order. I think as a team we said the week of April 10th. Correct me, is that Chris on my end? Is that right? I'm sorry.
That is right. That's
okay.
Correct.
So week of April 10th, if we could try to get something calendared, Mark. We'd like to re-engage on that conversation.
Okay.
And so we've received the DRC comments. We saw the stormwater management. I think that Dean Packard has separately spoken to Mark Etheridge. Is Mark on the call?
I am indeed.
Oh, great. Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. I'll turn my face on.
Great. I don't know, Dean, at this point, if you wanted to get any further clarification from Mark or next steps.
You're on mute, Dean.
Okay. I think the main thing for Mark is that regarding the pond next door, we're diverting about 90% of the water from our site, into an outfall, bypassing the pond.
Good.
So that except for any treatments up at the front of the property, be it, and that's an area that doesn't infiltrate well. So it'll be microbioretention, tapping into the on-site and the storm drain system at Dino Drive, and that filters down to the pond. But 90% of the water that would have been originally going to the pond in the 48-acre drainage area is being diverted around the pond from the site.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, because I understand that it's an issue, and we don't want to contribute to making it more of an issue.
Yeah, we just have to have some kind of safe conveyance if we're going to be increasing flow or even just sending additional redeveloped flow into something. And I know that there's a big problem out there. I know part of the property line actually extends into that pond for this property, as I recall. And I think we're looking for the 100-year water surface elevation to be shown because it's over 30-acre DA, just to clarify the floodplain issue. I saw that in the concept letter. But I'm sure that's something that you're aware of and you're working on. That's fine.
Yeah, the 100-year floodplain, is on various plans. It may not be identified well enough at this point, but it's within the stream valley buffer, so that, you know, we'll make sure that everything in the stream valley buffer is out of the limit of disturbance, including the 100-year floodplain. And the only other simple question I have is, are you looking for, you know, profile designs, or are you just looking for concept to show that it's all flowing downhill?
We need enough detail to know that what you're proposing seems feasible. So if you've got something that requires depth in order for it to work with gravity, then we need to see some preliminary profiles for that to make sure that there's adequate depth to make that work and have the storage that you need. I think in the letter we asked for some more detail on where this storm drain system is that you're going to be diverting the flow into, so some more clarity on that. But the level of detail is going to be enough to make it clear that it seems reasonable, that you don't have any constraints that we have overlooked.
Okay, there's like a stream channel in the rear of the property, and we'll be discharging into that, and also you're going to be looking for where all the roof drains are. So I have to coordinate with the architect to see where all the roof drains are to break up the building into pieces to each facility. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, we need to make sure that it's going to be feasible to provide the type of control that you're proposing. So we need to know something about that you can break up that roof area to meet the DA limitations to whatever you're draining to, and that it's going to actually be able to be connected to the receiving practice. Yeah.
And I have a couple other minor, you know, technical setback details that I can talk to you offline about that, but I think everything else is pretty straightforward. And I'm good with everything, Suli.
Okay, great. Then in terms of the comments we received from DOT, specifically DPAC, just before I turn it to Carl Wilson, our traffic engineer, to ask any questions, I just did want to, I noted one comment on there. This is a preliminary plan, or will require a preliminary plan. And I think that was in that memo, if I'm correct. So just wanted to, is Deepak on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Deepak.
Yeah.
Yes, so after the conditional use process, we'll need to file a preliminary plan, subsequent record plat to be able to build. So with that, Carl, did you want to ask any questions?
Sure. The only question, Deepak, that I have with regard to your comments is the access point that's proposed. Comment number 6 states to remove the existing unused curb cut along Valley Stream and replace with a typical street section. That's going to be where the proposed access point is. That's the 100-foot tangent section from Dino Drive, and that's going to basically be the proposed access for the site. Does DOT have any issues with that at this point?
No, as long as it's 100 feet tangent, we are good with that.
Okay, perfect. And then with regard to the traffic statement for this site, this is below 50 peak hour person trips. So we did prepare a traffic statement. We've not seen any comments from Park and Planning yet on that, just for any types of approvals or anything yet. And that's really basically where we are at from a transportation standpoint at this point.
Okay, I would defer to Chris.
Is Chris on the call?
This is Chris here. So I've looked at it. It looks like it's below the 50-person trips. So by LATR, it's exempt. There's no like approval. It's exempt. But I will caution you, it's conditional use. You're right below that 50-person trip threshold. We have had instances where, when it comes to the hearing examiner, we have had instances where where the hearing examiner has asked for more analysis. So I'll give you that word of warning. It's not coming from us. It is something that has happened. Hopefully, given that this site is not generating all that many trips, there's no bigger safety issues. Hopefully that's not an issue, but that is something that has happened.
And we certainly appreciate that. And we'll make sure that we are ultimately prepared for the hearing examiner to answer any questions that come up.
Just to follow up on that, Chris, in the other instances, when you've run into that with the hearing examiner, is it just sort of LATR type questions that we need to further elaborate on for the hearing examiner, or does she require actual study and that got filed and reviewed by your agency?
It's kind of run the gamut from, you know, a minor analysis, like a Q analysis or gap analysis. So we see that in, say, like daycares on a major road, really all the way up to a full transportation study.
Okay, well noted. Thank you.
This is not on a major road itself. The gap and queuing analysis doesn't seem to be as much of a concern. However, it is right off of, you know, where Dino Drive intersects 198, so that could be a point of contention.
Yeah. Okay, we'll try to get ahead of that. Thank you for the comment. So Carl, you good? Nothing, anything else you have? All right.
Yeah, I'm good at this point. I may speak with Chris offline later to discuss 198 and Dino, but at this point, for this group, we're in good shape.
Okay, so while we are on transportation, before we go to fire access, I just wanted to comment on one, I guess, comment came from Brett to consider upgrading the internal sidewalk. This, you know, we are sort of trying to balance, obviously you heard the stormwater concerns and the trying to address that. So it is preferred to keep the internal sidewalk to 5 feet. And we're also trying to maximize the buffer or landscape areas buffer adjacent to the properties to the plan south. So I guess that would be our comment. We're, you know, we'll try to find another foot if we can, but we are trying to kind of balance other things on the site.
Okay, yeah, understood. It was just a minor comment because the sidewalk on Dino Drive was also 6 feet, give or take. So I just wanted it to match that width. But yeah, I understand that.
Great. All right, and I think I heard from Dean on the fire access that we have a couple options that he's already worked out for turning the truck around behind the building. Is that right, Carl? Dean?
Yes, I had a discussion with Marie and she needs radiuses and turning paths. And ideally it would be to get the truck around the back of the building. And there's a couple different options to do that. And I can work it out in more detail with Marie, once we, after this meeting.
Okay. Great. And so Mark, I think we're still waiting on your landscape comments, which might follow soon. And then on the environmental with Josh, yes, we'll remove all disturbance from the stream valley buffer. So that's understood.
And then
this
is Chris here. I have another additional comment that we haven't issued yet, so I apologize. I wasn't actually technically part of the review, but I am part of the Fairland Master Plan team. And one of the things that we're considering with parks is accommodating some sort of access to Fairland Recreation Park through the site. So that would entail, when we come to preliminary plan, having an access easement, ideally along the internal sidewalk connection to the rear of the site. That way that opens the door to a potential access point to the park in the future. We haven't gotten to the point of having a clear idea where that access point is going to be, but those conversations are ongoing. So just something to be aware of. We're not anticipating that this is any sort of like hard improvement. It would just be an access point, an access easement.
I think we're going to have to talk about that. This is a sensitive population, and I'm a little concerned about inviting the public through the site. I understand connectivity. I hear you, but I just don't know where you're talking about. We need to keep it and be sensitive to the population we're trying to serve on this site.
Yeah, that's understood, and I'm going to work with the design team as well to see where that best fits. But we think it can be done, and again, this is an option for the future. We're still exploring some other connections, but this is something.
Where is the park exact? I don't understand exactly where it is that you're talking about.
On screen, that would be the far left border, as well as a little bit, I believe, a little bit of that upper left corner. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I can't quite see, but.
Hi, this is Henry from Parks. Just to jump in, that's sort of the upper northwest arm of Fairland Rec Park, and eventually we hope to have the trail system that runs up from Fairland Rec Park to come all the way up this way. And so it's just kind of making sure that it's on your radar. A potential connection might be worthwhile when we get up there.
Okay, but you're saying we're not gonna maybe learn more until the preliminary plan?
Well, the conversation's ongoing. So this is ongoing. We'll have more guidance as soon as we can. So it sounds like you're having a meeting on April 10th. Is that whenever we have guidance from the design team, we'll have additional guidance on any potential easements.
Okay, so we can talk about that at that meeting.
Great.
And just a little bit more of a point of clarification. So what would that potentially entail? Like a 6-foot wide trail down to the park?
At this point, we're unlikely to ask for a constructed trail, but we would want an easement that would potentially accommodate that in the future. And again, this is all, we're still trying to work that with parks. I know there's some environmental features that have to be looked into, but right now it's just the easement.
Yeah, we'll need to talk about that. I mean, personally, I have to tell you, I'm not seeing it happening. So, but in any case, we can talk about it.
And as far as a vertical perspective, there are steep slopes back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, understood. There's some tricky issues back there. Appreciate your guys' willingness to chat with us about it though, and just take a look to see if it's something that's worth trying to do.
Yeah. So Mark, I think that's all we had for today. And so as soon as we can get a date for the follow-up meeting with your design folks.
Yep, I will look at calendars and see what I can do.
And in terms of the dates for final submission and all of that, we can talk about it at that time as well.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
Anything else? Are we good?
I just have one question, Suli, for Josh. That we're proposing to save all the forest in the stream buffer and then some, but I think we'll be short. And just to make sure that we can comply with that by fee in lieu with anything that we're short with.
Will depend on the final numbers, Dean, and how we're looking at it. I'm still waiting on final designs. If there was going to be any design changes to make final comments on forest conservation, I think at this point, the best kind of advice I can give you is stay out of the stream valley buffers. That's fine. As for how you're going to finally meet the requirements, it will depend on what your requirements are and what we're looking at. I don't see an objection to that. I just want to make sure we know what we're looking at number-wise before we make that decision.
Okay, we'll certainly give you the highest and best.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.